righty, good morning, everyone. If you would begin to take your seat. I'm sorry to break up good conversation, but the clock says it's time for us to begin. So if you would take your seat. I don't have anything yet, so I'm not going to push any buttons yet, so whatever we got to do. Are you getting it? You need a little more volume? Can you hear? Let me know, please. Is that getting better? Okay. They're still saying this. Whatever this means, it's too much. I can tell you from here. So anyway, we'll get it straightened out here over a period of time, so it'll be good. Well, welcome this morning. Thanks for being here. My name's Mark Haney, and I'm president of Kentucky Farm Bureau, and I'm moderator for today's forum. And I want to say thank you on behalf of our almost 470,000 families in Farm Bureau. Thank you for participating and being here today. You know, we've been doing this, believe it or not, we've been doing this for over 80 years. Can you imagine that? We started in the 1940s having a forum. We do it for gubernatorial candidates. We do it for U.S. senatorial candidates and those elections, and we also do it for Commissioner of Agriculture candidates. And we've consistently had this, and it's been a success all these years. We appreciate being able to do that. Many county farm bureaus, many districts host the same type measure the candidate forums, more for statewide offices and legislative offices and even county government offices. We have measure the candidate meetings. So that's really a thing that Farm Bureau does. We want to get the candidates and get their campaigns in front of our people. I know that you know that Kentucky Farm Bureau is the largest farm organization in Kentucky, and we still have the same mission that we began with, and that's to be the voice for agriculture. We still take that very seriously, and we continue to do that. We have more than 25 state advisory committee meetings that go on throughout the state, and we're just on the tail end of those right now, wrapping up all those. We have an advisory committee on just about every commodity issue and every issue that's meaningful, certainly to us in Farm Bureau, whether it be education, tax, all those relative issues. We take our peers across the state and we put them at a committee level. We in Kentucky Farm Bureau, we operate by the committee system, and that only works well if you have participation. And that's what we encourage our members to do is to participate very much. Kentucky Farm Bureau is a nonpartisan organization. We say that often. We are nonpartisan, but we are highly political. We want our folks involved. We want our folks to take part in campaigns and to take part in the process. And by all means, we're going to be encouraging them to go to the polls and vote. And we think that's when we go to lobby, whether it's in Frankfort or whether it's in Washington, D.C., we want to be accurately say we are representing our people. This is what they're telling us that we want on this particular issue. So that system is very, very important to us. And we get our policy, as you know, not from in this building. We get our policy from the grassroots system all across Kentucky, from one end of the state to the other, east to west, north to south. Those folks live in communities, and they bring our policy forth, and we set those. We want our candidates, rather than us to endorse a candidate, we rather them embrace what our issues are and really give their opinion and accept what we have to offer at Farm Bureau, and we hope they align with those. I'd like to say we're welcome in the audience today, many different groups. One, of course, is our Board of Directors that are sitting here. Board of Directors, would raise your hand, please, so we'll know who they're all in the room. We have a board meeting going on today. We started early this morning. We'll finish later this afternoon, and it's working out to be able to have a break for this. We also have with us today a lot of leaders that are in with us today representing commodity groups. And if you're representing a commodity group or a leader in the commodity group, would you raise your hand, please? Look at all the folks that are here. Thank you. Thank you for being here and participating very much. We have certainly a lot of our leadership team within the system of our Farm Bureau, both in the Federation that are here. Also our insurance, we have our leadership team with us representing our insurance company today. So John, we appreciate that very much. We have our executive committee. The executive committee in Kentucky Farm Bureau is made up of me, president, and our two vice presidents, Eddie Melton, sitting down front, and Sharon Furchess, our second vice president. They will be asking questions this morning. We also have with us our two folks, our executive vice president of the Federation, Drew Graham, and we have our executive vice president and CEO of our insurance company, John Sparrow, down front, and we welcome them, of course, today. I'm trying to make sure I hit all the points here and get everybody set with who's in the room and how we're going to move forward. But one thing I do want to say, and I hope it comes through today, we want this to be a relaxed forum. We want our candidates to be relaxed, and I know you are. I can tell by looking. And so really and truly, at the end of the day, we want to say, that was very fair. Everybody got to express their opinion. They got to express their policies, their beliefs, their platforms. And we at Farm Bureau got to express what our policy are. And we want to give the same opportunity for our commodity brethren and sisters that are in the room with us today. So at the end of the forum, after we get, we're going to have 4 questions, and that will be proposed or that we will ask our candidates. And after that, then we're going to take questions from the audience, and that we're going to limit that to our board of directors and our commodity groups to be able to ask the questions today. We'll have opportunity for others after the forum. If we have media here, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, but it'll be a little bit later. Here's the way we're going to roll here. We will begin with a 5-minute opening statement and really kind of an introduction of themselves. I'm going to let, instead of me introducing them, I'm going to let them introduce ourselves, or themselves, of course. And we have Sierra Enlow with us, and we have Jonathan Shell. Those are our 2 candidates today. They will express themselves over a 5-minute period to begin with. Then we will start hearing from our topics, the 4 topics that we have. Topics of today's meeting are the state budget, the Kentucky Agricultural Development Fund, rural development is also an issue, and we will end with the veterinarian issues. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to the question, and each one, and then whoever speaks last, or the first person to speak, will get a 1-minute rebuttal if they choose at the end of that section, and then we will move on. At the end of the forum, the candidates will have a 5-minute opportunity to wrap up or say whatever they'd like to say to end the forum. We certainly think we have everything covered right here. I've said after the presentations, we will have questions from the audience. Limit that to a 2-minute response, if you would, please, and then we'll be able to move along and take as many questions as we possibly can, and that would be the desire. Does anybody have any question at all with that?
I think we're ready to
All righty. Well, good luck, and welcome again, and we look forward to this. And I hope this is also a fun exercise as well, and be very informative. We had a coin toss. That doesn't make sense, does it? We have a coin toss a little bit earlier, back in the other room. And with the results of the coin toss, we will hear first from Jonathan Shell, and for a 5-minute opening, and then after that, Sierra, you can begin. So, with that, Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Haney. Thank you very much. I won the coin toss, and so that means that I get to go first. But I'm Jonathan Shell, and I'm a full-time farmer. It's what I've done my entire life. 5 generations in Garrett County. Our farming operation looks like this. We raise background heifers. We do cow-calf pairs. We also have a greenhouse operation that's about 2 acres under roof that we raise hanging baskets, bedding plants, those kind of things. Got the biggest racket of my life 3 years ago. I started raising pumpkins. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite crop that I've ever been involved in. We grow corn for silage, and we also raise hay to be able to feed our cattle. And so I'm a full-time farmer. It's what I've always wanted to do. Growing up, I watched my granddad, I watched my dad, and I was able to get instilled in me a work ethic. And many of you all in here understand what that means, coming from the farm, understanding what that work ethic means, understanding that every single day whenever you wake up, what your goal is to make sure that you're providing for your family. And that's what I've wanted to do my entire life. I'm married to my wife, Brooke, and we have 4 kids, Jackson, Lydia, Reagan, and Graceland. My oldest child and my youngest child are adopted. It's really where my first love is. I tell people quite a bit that if there was a commissioner of adoption and foster care, that's what I would have been running for. It's really where my first love is vulnerable children in this state. I serve on the CASA Board of Lexington. That's the court-appointed special advocates. They advocate for children in the foster care system, not for the foster parent, not for the birth parents, not for the cabinet, but for those children themselves. And so it's something that's extremely important to me. I've got political experience. I ran in 2012 for the State House of Representatives, became the youngest member of the General Assembly. And whenever I got there, Democrats had controlled the House of Representatives for almost 100 years. As a Republican, I got there and I was beating my head on the table every single day. We couldn't get anything done that I thought that this state needed to be able to move us in the right direction. Things like prevailing wage reform, right to work, pro-life legislation, tax reform. And so in 2015, I asked my caucus to make me the chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee. I traveled the state, putting 70,000 miles on my vehicle, recruiting good conservative candidates across the state of Kentucky. And in 2016, we took over the House of Representatives. And I became the first Republican majority leader in the state of Kentucky. And we changed this state forever since then. All the successes that we're seeing now economically in the state came from the decisions that we made in the General Assembly and what they continue to do. And we've got great members of the General Assembly that are working diligently on a daily basis to ensure that this state is improving every single day. What I love about being here, Mr. Haney, is because I'm a Farm Bureau member. I've been a Farm Bureau member ever since the day that I was able to be one. I became one. Many of you all in this room will remember Henry West. He served on the board in Garrett County. When he passed away, they came to my granddad and they said, GB, he was on the board previously and wanted him to come on the board of directors there in Garrett County. And he said, look, I'm 73 years old. He said, I'd rather not do it, but I've got a grandson that wants to get involved in the community and try to help out. They said, why don't you call him? And so I think at the age of 17, I got on the board of Garrett County and was just changed ever since then. I saw what actual grassroots advocacy could do for a community, what grassroots advocacy could do for what we actually believe in agriculture and the way of life and the culture that we have. And that really instilled in me a drive and desire to make better my community. And that's what led me to run for state representative. And my experience in the legislature, my relationships across the state of Kentucky, and my accomplishments that I've made is what's led me to run for Ag Commissioner today. I think we've got extremely great potential in agriculture in this state. We have the best days ahead of us. The technologies that we're utilizing, the people that we have, the farmers that farm the ground every single day are exceptional. And what I want to be is someone who is helping be a conduit for that exceptional nature that we have in agriculture to continue the excellence that we have. We've had 2 great ag commissioners in Jamie Comer and Ryan Quarles, both who support my candidacy, and I can't wait to follow in their footsteps to continue that path of excellence that we've been on. I'm extremely excited to get in this position. I'm extremely excited to work with Farm Bureau and all of our commodity groups to move our state in the right direction. And I can't wait to get my hands on the department so that we can do something special for this state. Thank you all very much.
I'm Sierra Enlow. I'm proud to be your Democrat nominee for Commissioner of Agriculture. I grew up on a fifth-generation family farm in LaRue County, where my dad put my sister and I to work at age 5 pulling tobacco plants and made sure we worked all the way through 4-H and FFA and through our experience with the College of Agriculture. I want to talk a little bit about my Farm Bureau experience because I really learned about Farm Bureau going to our LaRue County Farm Bureau meetings when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I can remember watching the Meet the Candidates Forum on the VHSs that they pushed into the TV at those monthly Farm Bureau meetings. Matt Ingram was there at a lot of them too. And it's great to be here because that involvement in Farm Bureau continued through my young farmer involvement and through participating in Kentucky Farm Bureau's discussion meet in 2012, which I think Jonathan is ready for the rematch for today on stage. Excited to be here. I've wanted to talk a bit about my production agriculture experience because what I've been telling everyone on the campaign trail is that you really need 2 things to be a successful Commissioner of Agriculture. You need production agriculture experience and you need business experience. And that's what I'm looking forward to bringing to this office, is that business experience that I've worked on and developed since my work with the College of Agriculture and my projects with the USDA and Cooperative Extension. Because that business experience is what's going to allow Kentucky farmers to be successful and how we can really promote the agriculture industry in Kentucky. In my work in economic development, I've helped facilitate over $1 billion of investment in Kentucky alone. And that's $1 billion in manufacturing facilities, redevelopment facilities, jobs for our rural community. And that's really where your ag commissioner can serve Kentucky farmers and can bring a different perspective to this office. That space from the farm gate into the corporate supply chain is where you need an advocate, and you need someone who knows how to talk to corporate executives and knows how to negotiate with corporate executives. And I'm proud to bring that experience to this office and to this discussion today. I'm looking forward to answering each and every one of your questions. I've been asking for hard questions all across the campaign trail for the last few months so that I personally could be prepared for this debate and this Meet the Candidates Forum, because this is honestly the most important event that either one of us as a Commissioner of Agriculture candidate will do over the entire campaign trail. Looking forward to answering your questions, and I'm very proud to be here both as a Farm Bureau member and as a candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture today.
Thank you very much to both of you for those opening remarks. Now we're ready to begin with the questions. You will have 3 minutes to respond, and then whoever responds first will be able to get a rebuttal. We do have an official timekeeper down here. Taylor Gagnier he has a yellow card. When the yellow card, you got 30 seconds to wrap up. A red card, you know what that means. So our first topic this morning is the state budget. Eddie Melton, our first vice president, has that topic, and we will begin with response first from Sierra.
Okay, well, good morning to both of you. I hope we got the mic going now. So Sierra, Jonathan, thank you both for being here today, but especially thank you both for putting yourself out here to be a candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture, one thing that's so important to agriculture in Kentucky and to our organization, because we work with the Commissioner of Agriculture every day on a lot of issues. So one of our policies, Mark said we're going to talk about the state budget, but one of our policies says that we want a well-maintained and adequately funded Kentucky Department of Agriculture. It's been a policy of ours. I know that a lot of commissioners before have used that, saying that that's one thing that they want to do when they're trying to get funding for the department. But, you know, the department has a lot of statutory duties within the organization and within the department. You know, there's inspection, there's safety, consumer protection, and it takes a lot of money to do all those things and the staff that does that. So I have a 2-part question. First, describe to us your priorities for the budget within KDA, how you see that as your term begins. And the second part of that, and what you'll work with the General Assembly, actually, to how you'll secure that funding with them. And then as Commissioner, how will you work with Kentucky Farm Bureau to make sure that agriculture stays a viable industry within the Commonwealth?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Melton, for offering our first question today. I always tell everyone on the campaign trail that the Commissioner of Agriculture is a little bit like your mom in Kentucky politics. It takes care of everything you didn't know needed to be taken care of, and it has to do it in a way that's unintrusive to your day-to-day life. And we've spent the entire time of the campaign trail really talking about some of these different functions that the Department of Agriculture does and how important it is, not just to production agriculture, but to consumer agriculture across the state of Kentucky. Because in addition to all of the activities that you mentioned, the Commissioner of Agriculture is also responsible for evaluating play places at McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and making sure that they're safe, making sure that we have organic certification in place, doing a lot of work with our port infrastructure system, imports and exports across the state of Kentucky, and there's a lot of space for the Commissioner of Agriculture to operate on in the space of food access and food insecurity. So those are a lot of things that you have to get funded. And the priority for me as Commissioner of Agriculture is to making sure that we increase our funding, first and foremost, so that we can pay the Department of Agriculture employees what they deserve to get paid. We're in a space right now where we're asking people to work for under $30,000 a year and to work for what is equivalently not a livable wage at this point, and it's not giving us a competitive advantage of attracting talent to the Department of Agriculture. We're also going to be in a position with the Department of Agriculture where a lot of employees are going to be retiring over the next 4 years, and your next Commissioner of Agriculture is going to have to work on backfilling those. So that is my first priority, is to make sure that we're increasing those salaries of those Department of Agriculture employees so we can continue to provide services not only to Kentucky farmers, but to producers across the state and consumers across the state. With working with the General Assembly in this question, early on in our campaign trail, Jonathan and I were both asked the same question, that what would our first 100 days of our office look like? Jonathan's response was that he was going to do a survey of Kentucky agriculture, and I think this is important because that's what we should have been doing over the course of the campaign trail, and have spent the time meeting with different agriculture groups to help identify their priorities and what they need to see funded, and how the Commissioner of Agriculture can truly advocate in that first 100 days. I spent a good portion of the campaign trail making sure that I know what those groups want and know what priorities we need to have so that we have a plan on day one when I get started. Because your first 100 days in office, 60 of them are a General Assembly budget session. And I'm looking forward to bringing that expertise, including the influence of Kentucky Farm Bureau, different commodity groups, into that conversation and going to bat on day one with the General Assembly to get more money in the budget for all Kentucky agriculture programs.
Thank you, Eddie, for the question. For me, the budget priorities for me is going to be making sure that we keep our tobacco settlement dollars whole for agriculture, for innovative projects that we need across the state of Kentucky. Those dollars have been extremely important for agriculture to be able to diversify our operations all across the state of Kentucky. Another priority of mine in the state budget is going to be ensuring that we are adequately funding the Department of Agriculture and the consumer protection aspect of it. The gas pumps, the pesticide regulation, the bounce houses, all these things. We have great department employees at the Department of Agriculture, and to ensure that they're able to do their jobs correctly, not in a way that we're penalizing people across the state of Kentucky and businesses, but making sure that we're getting them right, making sure that it's easy and affordable for them to be able to do business in the state of Kentucky. Another budget priority of mine is to ensure that we're looking towards the future for what we need in the state of Kentucky. And one of those kind of wish list things that I've been thinking about is in the Farmers Care part of the budget that they've started to develop, is having a group of farmers that's able to go across the state of Kentucky and advocate for agriculture across the state of Kentucky to different groups and speak to them. I think that the groups that are against us as agriculture today are changing. They're advancing how they're doing it and how they're changing the way that we farm, not because of the science behind it, not because they're correct, but because they're the loudest. And so ensuring that we have people across the state of Kentucky in a network to go out and talk about the great things in agriculture is extremely important. For me, working with the General Assembly is something that I do on a daily basis today. Being the majority leader of the state of Kentucky several years ago, during that period of time, I've recruited nearly 75% of the people who serve in those positions today in the House and the Senate. Those are my friends. Those are people that I respect. Those are people that respect me. Those are people that respected me enough to vote for me unanimously without any opposition to be their leader. And so I'm looking forward to working with them on a daily basis to ensure that agriculture is getting exactly what they need in this state. And I can tell you that they're going to take my phone calls, they're going to take my meetings, and we're going to have a great relationship, working relationship. I talk to the leaders of the House and the Senate almost on a daily basis still today. Most of those members are friends of mine. The people who run the budget in this state, and Jason Petrie, Brandon Reed, are great friends of mine who support my campaign. And I can't wait to actually get in this office so that we can have those relationships moving forward to utilize those for agriculture in this state. And as far as putting the budget priorities together and working on with Farm Bureau, I made a joke whenever I met with Mr. Haney and the executive team whenever I first decided to run that I wanted the department to maybe change its name to the Kentucky Department of Farm Bureau, just because you all don't advocate for things that are not good for agriculture. And I'm not going to advocate for things that are not good for agriculture. And so we're going to have a close working relationship. The things that we work on are going to be extremely close together. And the relationships that all of us have in this room today, from the board members that are here in the audience to the executive team that's here, to John Sparrow, who runs the insurance side, and Drew Graham, who runs the Federation side. Thank you all for your service, and I can't wait to work with you all. Thank you.
Sierra, would you like a rebuttal?
Sure, I have a question for Jonathan as part of the rebuttal. Part of working with getting a budget passed and thinking about how we build these relationships is going to require bipartisan support. How do you think you would proceed with securing that bipartisan support?
Well, I appreciate the question, but we have supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. And so working with Democrats on the other side of the aisle, something that I did whenever I was majority leader, their votes matter as well. And when Rocky Adkins became the minority leader, when I took his position, we had a meeting once a week while I was majority leader to ensure that the priorities that we had that he knew about so that we could work together. And it's something that I'm going to continue. Whenever people come to my greenhouses and they buy flowers, I don't ask them if they're a Democrat or Republican. I sell them flowers just the same. When they come buy pumpkins from me, I don't ask them if they're a Democrat or Republican. And so that's the same way that we're going to govern in the Department of Agriculture, because agriculture is not partisan. And I'll just be honest, I'm tired of politics myself personally. We've got radicals on this side, we've got elites on this side, and we've got 80% of the people in the middle who are just fed up with this stuff. People that are talking about parties and politics, they don't understand that people are struggling to pay for groceries, that it's hard to find child care for your families, that it's hard to make your bills meet, that it's hard to pay for your fertilizer bills, that commodity prices, we buy everything in agriculture wholesale and we sell everything retail. And I'll just be honest with you, I'm tired of politics. And so what I'm going to do is wake up every single day. I'm going to work hard for you all as your next Commissioner of Agriculture. Thank you.
And Jonathan, to a rebuttal. So I don't think that you had time allocated for that, so I would like to finish my 60 seconds of my rebuttal. With that being said, I think it is important to have a Democrat Commissioner of Agriculture to work with what will be a Democrat administration in the governor's administration, and to build that cross-agency collaboration. I'm looking forward to bringing that expertise to this office and bringing those relationships. Those cabinets are very important to the success of the Department of Agriculture. There are certainly a lot of important programs that are part of the agriculture industry that are administered by those cabinets. I mean, I think that will be important in our next administration for Commissioner of Agriculture as well.
All right, thank you. Well, y'all get to swap at rebuttal time. I got to get this figured out here.
I promise you won't have to worry about that with me.
Okay, our next topic is the Kentucky Agricultural Development Fund, certainly an important topic for agriculture. Sharon Furchess, our second vice president, has that topic, and it will begin, Jonathan, with you going first.
First of all, I want to thank you both for being here this morning too, and the other folks that we have in the room. It's an important day for us, and we appreciate you all devoting time to us for that reason and to talk about the issues. As you know, everyone in this room knows, for 20 years now, the Ag Development Board has made significant investments on the county and the state level that have had a tremendous impact on Kentucky agriculture, most likely on a number of people that are in this room today. Both the Ag Development Board and the Ag Finance Corporation have had and continue to have a number of excellent programs. Now that they are housed under the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, do you plan any changes in these programs? And if so, what type of changes would you be looking at?
Thank you, Ms. Furchess. And I'm an extremely great supporter of the ag development funds that we have in the state. I think they've been the best money that we've been able to spend in this state to be able to help farmers diversify their operations. You know, I've got a diversified farming operation now currently because of the ag development funds. Before I ran for state representative, after I became a representative, I stopped applying for the programs. But before that, we utilized them on our farm to ensure that we could, get things that maybe we necessarily wouldn't have gotten before, but because of the cost share involved in it, we were able to do it. And I think it's been extremely beneficial, especially in one area, is in our beef cattle industry with the bull program and the heifer program of getting better and great genetics for the state of Kentucky. I think that we see that, Dave, in what the feedlots are saying out west about the improvement in our genetics that we've got in our cattle today. And so this program that we've utilized has been extremely important to me. The only changes that I would want to take and I've talked to several members of the Ag Development Board, many of them are on my campaign committee and supportive of my campaign, is reevaluating and doing that 20-year plan that they did 20 years ago. We're due for another one to see in what direction that we may want to take Kentucky agriculture into the future, looking at large-scale production or in more co-op sharing that we could have across the state of Kentucky. I think we're going to talk about rural economic development, and I'll explain further some of my views and ideas that we've got in that segment. But agriculture is economic development. We're business people in this room. We're businessmen and women as agriculture. One of the things that I think that we fail to do a lot of times is explain that we're not just farmers. It's not just cows, sows, and plows anymore. We're business people that have to understand how to run a budget, how to manage people, and how to understand markets to move beyond that. We're in a world today where international trade is extremely important, and so I think there's definitely aspects of the ag development dollars that we can reevaluate to look at how we're best utilizing those. Maybe some programs have run their course. Maybe we need some new ones, but what I want to do is make that something that's a part of the entire agriculture community to get those inputs from them. Thank you.
The Ag Development Funds are a great program that we've historically had in the agriculture industry in Kentucky, and they provide a valuable resource for Kentucky farmers to look at how we're approaching new industries in Kentucky and how we're changing our operations to meet future market demands. As Commissioner of Agriculture, I want to spend more time focused on programs and supporting programs like the Bluegrass Ag Tech Initiative and thinking about how we invest in this next wave of agriculture. We've done a great job of increasing the number of cows on farms in Kentucky and number of sows on farms in Kentucky. And we've served that purpose with our Ag Development Funds. It's time to now think about where we can go from an ag tech perspective and how we can invest in new technologies to help our farmers meet the next generation of agriculture. And that's going to look a lot of different ways. We're going to need to look at contained and controlled environmental agriculture and how we're supporting that and how we're putting our technology in the hands of our farmers to meet that demand. We're going to see that trend continuing in the agriculture industry. There are going to be some other programs that we're going to need to take a look at. We're going to have to think about how we get more beginning and minority farmers involved in the agriculture industry. We're in a spot where a lot of farmers are retiring and they want to sell their farms and they want to keep them involved in agriculture production. And we only provide a solution to that if we can provide good support for beginning farmers and ranchers. Our Ag Development Funds have been really instrumental in helping beginning farmers and ranchers, but sometimes the processes are obtuse and hard to find if you're not currently part of the agriculture industry. As a Commissioner of Agriculture, I'm looking forward to bringing more transparency to how the Ag Development Funds are spent, both so that we can support our ag industry and we can talk about our great successes, but then also so that we can get other people engaged and help support diversity in agriculture in different ways from traditional agriculture. I'm certainly looking forward to continuing and advocating for more support, that 50% of those the Master Settlement Funds go into the ag development programs, which I know is a proud Farm Bureau policy. Certainly looking forward as well to continuing that space and to continue to advocate for these funds staying a part of the agriculture industry and specifically advocating for them to have multipliers and have strong economic development projects to continue to expand where the agriculture industry is in Kentucky and where it can grow to in the future.
Thank you, Jonathan. You need a rebuttal? All right, we'll move on then to the next topic. It is rural development. Eddie has that topic, and Sierra, you will be going first.
Thank you. As we talk about rural development in our rural communities, it's actually so important to our rural communities, the things we do. Agriculture's changed so much in the last 20, 25 years or the last 10. It's amazing probably where we're going to go in the next 10. There's a lot of people that work off the farm right now, and they want to be able to stay on their farms and work on those farms. And there's a lot of opportunities out there for them to be able to do additional things on their farms to do that. We have on-farm retail markets. We have direct-to-consumer farmers that do that, agritourism, value-added products, all those things that we do on our farms. But one thing we have to have on our farms is broadband. And I think with rural development, that broadband thing is something that we've worked on. There's been a lot of money allocated, but we've got to get the money on the ground. We've got to get the last mile. That person that's at the end of the line down there, they have to be able to get that broadband out there with the equipment we use and all the things, the markets, swiping credit cards, all those things are so important to us. So I also have a two-part question for both of you. As Commissioner of Agriculture, what will you do to make broadband more accessible to rural Kentucky? And the second part of that is a lot of existing markets are out there. What will you do as Commissioner of Agriculture to keep those markets in place and then develop new markets for all the products that we have in agriculture in Kentucky?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Melton, for the question. I tell this story a lot on the campaign trail because in July, my parents were without internet for 22 days on their farm, which meant that there was essentially, it's hard to do business when you can't get AT&T out there to finish that last mile. And it's unfortunate that we have to advocate and fight as farmers for something that should be a basic service for all Kentuckians. Because at this point, you cannot participate in the economy unless you have good broadband internet access. The other aspect that I like to tell people about broadband internet access and why it's so important is because it's not just important for the agriculture industry, it's important for rural manufacturing and our ability to get rural manufacturers to locate in our communities so that we have good off-the-farm jobs and we have good processing capabilities for Kentucky agriculture products. It certainly at this point is not an issue we can ignore any longer, and it's something that we have to really spend some time thinking about how this issue would be solved in Kentucky. And I think we're going to have to think about passing some legislation that identifies rural broadband internet access as a basic service that every Kentuckian deserves. I think it looks the same way as rural electrification looked and the Rural Telecommunications Act looked in the early 1900s, because that's the same stage that we're at from an economic development basis. The other aspect that we're going to have to spend some time working on is making sure that we think about how that last mile is truly serviced and if our farmers can be invested in that in different ways. From a traditional broadband internet standpoint. And so I think that it's going to be a multi-part solution to that. I think it's something that has to be a #1 priority and has to continue to go forward. I want to use the remaining part of my time to answer the second part of Mr. Melton's question is how are we going to look at new markets for Kentucky farmers? And this is really where I've spent a lot of time talking to people across the state of Kentucky and talking to different business leaders because it's something that we absolutely have to do. At this point, Kentucky farmers need new markets for their crops and they need new opportunities to differentiate their products. And as Commissioner of Agriculture, that's what I'm looking forward to applying my economic development experience, bringing new food processors here, new manufacturing facilities to help support that agriculture industry. When the city of Louisville is looking at recruiting a tofu manufacturing facility to the city of Louisville, they should be talking to Kentucky farmers in that process. We should not be thinking about recruiting a facility here and not thinking about how we build the supply chain for Kentucky farmers. The same is true for distilleries in Kentucky. We should not be recruiting distilleries unless we're building that supply chain for Kentucky grain to go into those distilleries. In my experience, that $1 billion of investment that I've helped facilitate for the state of Kentucky is specifically in that area, and that's specifically how I'm looking at driving new markets for Kentucky farmers.
The broadband is extremely important. I live in a rural community, and we're actually getting a new cell tower right beside of my greenhouses right now, I think. We've got a sign that's came up, so we're getting ready to not lose service going from one side of my farm to the next, which is really exciting for me. But broadband access is one of the most important critical things that we can have. And I'm really proud of the work that the legislature has done on passing bills and laws and putting in funding into those things so that we can actually get it expanded out through the state of Kentucky. And I know that's something that you all work diligently on, Mr. Haney, here with Kentucky Farm Bureau to ensure that those monies are getting there. Another partnership I know that you all work very closely with is our rural electric co-ops. And the same way that we did rural electrification, I think is the way that we're going to get that last mile put into the state of Kentucky. And they already know how to do it. And so they're working towards that to be able to get work through the PEC and the FARC and all the other regulatory agencies that they've got to go through to get those last miles there. But funding is the most important thing, and making sure that we can get funding there. And so working with the legislature to ensure that they understand that it's a priority of agriculture and a priority of the Ag Commissioner is going to be a #1 priority of mine for broadband. But I think we also have to keep our eyes on the future. Broadband is what the technology is now, and we need to make sure that we're looking towards the future of what may be the next connectivity that brings a better connection for our people and our farmers. I say this all the time, doesn't matter if you got $1 million combine if you can't hook up to the GPS on your farm. And so we've got to make sure that our farmers have the necessary things in place to be able to do it. For rural development, this is my favorite topic to talk about, because for me, my first 100 days of day one, what I want to do is I want to get our commodity groups together, and I want to overlay our state with exactly where our commodities are, with where our beans, our corn, our cows, all the things that we've got in this state. And then I want to look at it and say, where are we deficient? Where do we need more infrastructure in this state to ensure that we're getting the markets available to our farmers, so that I don't have farmers in Garrett County driving 3 hours to deposit their beans or their corn, to make sure that they've got those markets available for them to be able to get it. That includes processing. We need processing facilities here in the state. We need to get closer from the farm gate to the food plate with our consumers. And so ensuring that rural development is looking at it, not economic development for economic development's sake. We've gotten into a pattern right now in the state of Kentucky where we're announcing all these jobs that are being created. But what I'm seeing in communities that I'm talking to is that you're sitting down a 5,000 job factory somewhere where there's already 9,000 jobs open and available, and all the small businesses are losing their employees going to the factory, which there's a lot of good things about that, but there's a lot of bad things that people are struggling. I mean, that's the point that I'm hearing across the state of Kentucky, that people are struggling. And so on top of rural development for me, on the large-scale production of agriculture, is on our smaller farmers, working with our hospitals, our jail systems, and our school districts to ensure that we're getting scheduled delivery of commodities that they can have available to them, getting more Kentucky Fresh Proud products into those school districts, into those hospitals, and into those jail systems, because they got to have food on a daily basis, and we need to do a better job of marketing our products to them so that our farmers can be more profitable, so that our consumers can be more educated, and so that we can make sure that Kentucky agriculture is sustainable for the future.
Sierra, would you like a rebuttal? I'm good, thank you. Okay. All righty. Our final prepared topic this morning is veterinarian issues, and Sharon will speak to this and have the questions for this one. And Jonathan, you're up first on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. The Office of the State Veterinarian is a vital division of KDA, and it's on the front line of working with farmers in the event of a disease outbreak or natural disasters that we have experienced in recent years. We have always enjoyed a great working relationship here at Kentucky Farm Bureau with the Office of the State Vet, and certainly will continue that. They also work closely with large and food animal veterinarians in rural areas of the state, and they are in short supply. Commissioner Quarles has had a working group for quite some time, and I'm pleased to have been able to serve on that and trying to see what some of the issues are that we can overcome that deficit of those large animal veterinarians. The focus on that has become more difficult. I do have a two-part question as well. What initiatives would you encourage and support to incentivize the large animal and food animal veterinarians to practice in rural areas of Kentucky? And as Commissioner of Agriculture, what resources would you provide the Office of State Veterinarian to help with staffing needs and fulfilling what those regulatory requirements are in the event of disease outbreaks or natural disasters?
Thank you, Ms. Furchess. Those are great questions. It's one of the biggest needs that we have in agriculture today is on our large animal side. And my veterinarian, Devin Carlton, that I use on my farm, I see him when I'm out at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I see him whenever I'm out at 10 p.m. at night. It's a hard job that we have in rural Kentucky with these large animal vets. It's something that we need to recognize, and it's something that we need to help facilitate to get more people involved in it. And it's not easy. It's a tough job. And I think that it's one of the toughest jobs that we have in agriculture is being a large animal veterinarian. We need to find ways to be able to make it more available and better to them, and have people coming into our communities that care about it, that want to stay. What we're seeing from conversations that I'm having with local vets is whenever you have a student that comes out, one, they don't have the ambulatory experience of actually being in the field enough, and so whenever they get there, they're struggling to be able to get that experience live on the ground. The other thing is that it almost doesn't matter how much you pay them at this point, that if they find a better job, they're going to leave to where that it can be something that's easier. And so it's just a struggle that we're going to have. It's an issue that we've had for 40 years. I don't think we're going to fix it immediately. And so some of the things that I want to work on with our veterinarian shortage is, one, looking at Lincoln Memorial and other institutions like that of increasing our slots that we have for Kentucky. Another one is working with the regional schools in the state of Kentucky to find an ambulatory lab services that we can better our relationship with Auburn to ensure that whenever students are out of state getting their education, that they're coming back to the state to be able to fulfill those spots. I think those are two things that we can do. Another one is with our vet techs that we have, is working with the Kentucky Vet Medical Association to ensure that we're utilizing them to the fullest extent possible. And then on the state veterinarian side is making sure that we've got the funding available to be able to get those resources to them, to make sure that we've got the people in place and the funding to be able to get those people in there. I think that one of the ways that we can do that is working closely with our universities with that division, that maybe we have dual roles with the diagnostic labs across the state. And then the last one on the emergency management side of it is we've got a new division in the state with emergency management on our animal side that's doing an amazing job. I think that the commodity groups in here, if they've worked with that division right now, everything that I'm hearing is they're extremely pleased. The new state vet, everybody that I've talked to that has worked with him at this point is really pleased and excited about the work that he's going to be doing. And so I think that we've got some positive directions that we're going in, and thanks to Commissioner Quarles and putting together that working group, I think that we're going to have some things that we can immediately look at on day one whenever we get there.
Thank you for your question. This is one of the areas I do really want to compliment the existing Department of Agriculture and Administration for their hard work and what they've been able to do to lay the foundational groundwork to start solving these issues. And that's the best thing you can hope for as a candidate for office, is that the previous office has laid some good foundational work for you. And that's really the type of foundational work that we're going to have to continue to build, and we're going to have to continue to evaluate. And this is a great use of ag development funds, to be honest. It's a great opportunity to think about how we bring more diverse careers to agriculture and how we're supporting Kentucky farmers. And I think we're going to have to look at using some of those ag development funds to support people locating in rural communities, specifically with the experience to not only serve our beef and our cattle industry, but also to serve what is going to be a growing exotic animal industry in Kentucky. And that's something too that we're seeing, is that even when we get large vets back into these communities, they're not able to service different types of livestock and able to service what are growing industries in Kentucky from an alternative livestock industry. So when we think about bison, venison production, game birds, we're not having veterinarians that have experience in that space as well. The second thing that I think will be really beneficial, and we have a great person leading our community college and technical system now to really tap into some of those resources and see how we can help train veterinary techs to help provide some of these services, particularly in rural communities. And I think we're going to have to look at that. We're going to have to look at creating workforce development programs within our community college with a great partnership to be able to meet those needs until we get actual vets back into these communities and we've solved that larger term issue of bringing veterinarians back to the community. And I've said one of my first priorities is making sure that we're getting the right types of resources within the Department of Agriculture from a budgetary perspective, and we're paying people well. And I think that's particularly applicable to this question, because that's the issue, is that we can't recruit talent if we're not paying that talent at a competitive market rate, particularly something that doesn't just require general veterinary knowledge. Regulatory vets and large animal vets require specialized education, and we should be there to support people that want to pursue careers in those industries. And I think we're going to have to do that, starting with the Department of Agriculture and paying those individuals what they deserve to be paid, so that we can retain them and then we can expand from there. It starts with cleaning your own house and strengthening your own house first, to be able to provide good solutions across the state.
All right, thank you. Jonathan, would you like a rebuttal? You're good? Okay, well, thank you all for your responses. Now we're going to open up to take some other questions. If you remember, you recall it earlier announced we'd be taking questions from board members and commodity groups. So you'll have 2 minutes to respond with that. So who would like to be recognized first? If you have a question, please state your name and who you represent. Sarah Beth.
And, oh, thank you. My question is for both of you, and it relates to private property rights and the preservation of prime farmland in the Commonwealth. Kentucky Farm Bureau has advocated for both private property rights and the preservation of prime farmland in the Commonwealth for over 100 years, and will continue to do so. But I wanted to ask, as part of your administration and your role as Agriculture Commissioner, how will you promote private property rights, and how will you commit to preserving the prime farmland across the Commonwealth in your administration going forward?
Sierra, you would go first.
Thank you. That's a great question to think about how we are balancing agriculture production with growth within our communities. And this is honestly a conversation I have pretty extensively as an economic developer across the state. It's a conversation we're having in LaRue County with the LaRue County Industrial Foundation about how do we prep for growth from the Glendale Blue Oval SK plant while balancing how are we protecting Kentucky farmland. We have an additional layer in LaRue County because we have 2 national parks, and we have to think about how we protect the land surrounding the national parks as well. And I think the real answer from that comes from good community conversations in the beginning before it becomes an issue. I tell a lot of my clients this, that when you're looking at economic development and you're making good community choices, you have to have that conversation 10, 20, 30 years in advance of an actual facility or factory locating in your community or even in the adjacent community. And it requires good community planning to say, hey, this agriculture land is important to us. Let's keep it zoned as agriculture. Let's not have the agriculture zoning be able to be applied to industrial facilities. And it requires you to say that, hey, this land maybe is not the perfect agriculture land, and this is where we want to target for industrial development and help drive the growth there. You're not going to be able to stop progress, and so it's better to plan for it and to have a good opportunity and a good plan in place from the community perspective. Some of the pieces of legislation specifically that I'd like to see related to this and protecting agriculture land, we're going to have to increase what is considered a farm, in a farm tract and an agriculture tract in Kentucky. 5 acres is too small right now, and that's the first step in solving this problem and protecting Kentucky agriculture land is really evaluating whether or not we're considering 5 acres a farm and if we should increase that to be able to protect that land from an agriculture perspective.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Guffey, for the question. Private property rights is one of the most American things that we have. I mean, it's one of the things that separates us from the rest of the world is that we are actually able to own things in America. And I think that it's one of the inherent things that we need to make sure that we're protecting on a daily basis. And I met with the realtors a couple of weeks ago or maybe last week, and we were talking, and one of the things that I told them is I said, I want to make it really hard on you for a farmer to make the decision that he is still profitable or she is still profitable, that she can still get the workforce that she needs available or he needs available on the farm, to where that it is an extremely tough decision for them to decide to sell to a solar farm or subdivide their ground up into later ages in their life. And that's one of the things that we face in agriculture today is with an aging population and farming, is that the profitability is not what it used to be. The inputs that we have are extremely high. The outputs are not what they used to be percentage-wise. The workforce that we're needing on the farm today is not where it should be. Most every farmer that I talk to that has some type of front-facing business or something where they need employees besides themselves and family, can't find the people to be able to do the work. Every business in America that I've talked to and in Kentucky says that they could nearly double their output if they could just get the employees to be able to show up to work, be clean on a drug test. Most of them have stopped drug testing. I mean, that's the world that we're living in today. And so I think that beyond just protecting private property rights, to ensure that, that we're not getting overreached by government that's coming in and taking it away for economic development's sake, just to have economic development, for some politician to stand on the stage and say that they created X amount of jobs. I don't know if you all can tell, but I'm kind of put out with politics these days. What I want to do is make sure that in farming, that we're doing everything that we possibly can from the Department of Agriculture to make sure that our farmers are profitable, that our ag businesses are profitable, so that it's an extremely tough decision on them to make for the benefit of themselves, whether or not to keep farming and not to subdivide, not to sell off. And I think that that's what we deserve as farmers, of profitability, to be able to be there, to be able to work, and to be able to have a generation coming behind us that wants to do the same thing. And I think that's another issue that we have is younger, newer farmers coming into agriculture, and there's some ideas that I have on that as well.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, Mr. Haney. I'm Tyler Ferguson from Johnson County. I represent District 10 on the Federation Board for Farm Bureau. As you alluded to earlier, working with the General Assemblies is a big part of the job. And we all know that ag experience in both the House and the Senate is diminishing with every election. A lot of the rules and policies that farmers abide by are dictated by the General Assembly and then regulated by KDA. So as Ag Commissioner, how will you work to see that these policies enforced by the General Assembly are not harmful to KDA or to agriculture in general?
I appreciate it, Tyler. Thank you very much for that question. That is one of the most important things that the Department of Agriculture and the Commissioner has to do is work with the General Assembly, ensuring that we are protecting agriculture. And I will say this, that we've got a good commissioner or a good chairman of the Ag Committee in the House that understand agriculture, comes from one of the most agriculture areas, counties in the state, in Graves County and Richard Heath. But we also have somebody in the Senate who's the ag chairman whose father may be here in the crowd today. And so we've got a special interest in that, in having Mr. Glenn Howell serving on Farm Bureau, been an active farmer. And so in those two important positions, we actually have active farmers that are there. When I was the main recruiter for the House and the Senate on the Republican side, one of the things that I tried to do was to get people who were involved in their communities, people who didn't care about their re-election, that they were there to do the right thing, and if I could, make sure that they had some kind of agriculture background, because it was so important to me. What I noticed through my advocacy with Farm Bureau and learning from you all how to do that is that we need to ensure that we've got good education and good communication with the leaders that are there, not just in the state legislature, but congressionally, to make sure that Washington understands. A lot of times politicians don't see the light until they feel the heat. And so you being in front of them face to face whenever you're taking your tours to Washington or to Frankfurt is extremely important. It's one thing for some anonymous lobbyist to go up there and talk to them about an agriculture issue. It's completely different whenever they see your face, Cloyce. I mean, it makes a difference whenever you're there face to face with them and you're talking about your issues. The other thing about it is we've just got to have somebody in this position. What they've done to coal for the last 30 years in this state is exactly what they're trying to do to agriculture today. If you don't realize that, if you're not seeing that now, you need to wake up to it. And we need somebody in this position in the Department of Agriculture as your commissioner that's going to fight every single day to make sure we don't need them to do anything for us. We just want us to leave them alone. We just want them to leave us alone.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for your question. And I think it's an important question because that's the narrative of agriculture across the state of Kentucky, is that we're losing production agriculture experience. Part of what I've been talking about on this campaign trail is that the Department of Agriculture, and the reason that everyone in Kentucky votes for a Commissioner of Agriculture is because agriculture really touches every Kentuckian's lives. And we still have to get that message across, because just because you're not in production agriculture doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a valuable industry to you and you shouldn't be educated and know about it. And that's something that we've worked really hard to build connections for on the campaign trail, and I've worked really hard to help explain in economic development in my work across the state, is that just because a policy seems obtuse doesn't mean that it's not impacting you, and we need to think about how it's translated to the average voter. With that being said, a lot of politicians don't understand the implications of the policies that they're passing. They don't understand that, that my intent for this policy is not how it's playing out in practice. We see that a lot with tax policy. We see it a lot with economic development policy across the state. And it takes business leaders being there to help educate elected officials and advocating and participating as part of the process to help get those policies in place the way that they are truly impactful and can help grow an industry as opposed to stifle it. And that's really the Farm Bureau experience, and having that grassroots background and to drive a policy agenda. And that's the type of advocacy that I learned, again, while I was growing up in Kentucky Farm Bureau, and I knew that this was the world that I wanted to participate in and to be involved in. The example that Kentucky Farm Bureau sets as they're advocating for policies for the ag industry and for their members are very important, and the way that they do it is the way that we have to continue to drive change within the state in the General Assembly. Thank you.
All right, next question. The lady in the rear, yep, you saw your hand a while ago.
My name's Portia Brown. I'm with Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. We basically represent family-owned, privately owned working woodlands. And there was a mention by Ms. Enlow of the distillery market. That is a huge market for the state of Kentucky, as you all know. And it's provided opportunity for grain to be used that might not have been as profitable. But it's also important for woodlands. And a vast majority of Kentucky is wooded. And when we talk about development, we need to think about the resource that our woodlands provide. And so I'm interested in how the Commissioner of Agriculture can support working forest and be sure that we have working forests to provide for the distillery industry, for the paper industry, and the other industries that use the woodland commodities. And an important aspect of that to think about when you're talking about distilleries. Do you know what the most expensive ingredient in bourbon is? And how we might preserve the production of that ingredient and other wood products in Kentucky?
And this is an excellent question because, again, agriculture is not just one crop or one commodity. It's truly the full ecosystem of how we're looking at this and how we're supporting the whole ecosystem. And that's something that, in agriculture, and as someone who grew up on a farm, my family's always been really passionate about conservation and putting land that shouldn't be in agriculture production back into forestry, looking at how we're implementing conservation programs on our farmland, because it is important. We don't log in. We have a sustainable logging program on our farm where we're not logging any trees unless they're over a certain size, and we log in different stages over the farm. Specifically to service the bourbon industry. And that's something that, as we think about good agriculture, we know that we're already considering within the agriculture industry, but we have to get that information out to people that maybe new farmers and new purchasers of agriculture land, that this is a good option and this is a good long-term investment for your family and multi-generational operations. It's not, the bourbon industry is growing so rapidly. It's a tough question to answer about supply and demand and whether or not we're able to meet the demand of the bourbon industry. And it's something that we're going to have to actively look at and create a program and think about how we're supporting, because it is something where the demand is outpacing the supply for white oak. And it's certainly something I'd be interested in looking and pursuing more as a Commissioner of Agriculture.
What was your name? Ms. Brown, was white oak the answer? Okay, I thought it was, but I was just making sure. You didn't say it. I was just making, I thought Right. What I would like to say to that is I know what I don't know, and I don't know about this, and it's not something that I've been involved in the past on my farming operation, and in my area of the state, it's something that we've not been involved in. So I would very much like to have a conversation with you once we win this office. We get in there to find out what we can do to help you. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Andy Bishop, Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. This question's for both of you. We often have the discussion in all of agriculture, but especially in the cattle industry, of how do we increase involvement from our juniors coming in and taking over the farming operations. And what we're seeing is the lack of value to be able to do that. And margins are decreasing. We've seen the pork and poultry sector essentially vertically integrate over the last 20 years since Ag Development Fund began. And that was a strategic move by them, and it's been profitable for them, for most of them. We've seen the dairy industry consolidate as well, but the beef industry is the one industry left in livestock that we've been able to maintain our individuality for our farmers. So my question is for you guys is, what can we do as an Ag Development Board or as an agriculture office to increase that value? And I think what we've seen is 50 years ago we had cow-calf producers only. Over the last 30 years we've had cow-calf producers and backgrounder stockers. But we've increased our commodity byproducts in the state of Kentucky through the distillery products, through grain products that we've had here in ethanol production. We've got an opportunity to continue to keep those cattle here in Kentucky and feed those cattle out and finish those cattle. We lost a tremendous opportunity in western Kentucky when it came to the American Foods Group and their packing facility, but we've still got an opportunity to maintain those cattle. And from an economic standpoint, the more we keep those cattle here in the state and capitalize on that margin at each step in the game, the more value we add to producers and the bottom line for producers in Kentucky. But what I've seen from our office so far is a lack of involvement and the lack of willingness to encourage farmers to get into that, to learn how to feed cattle out here and to help with that infrastructure to be able to do that. We know mud is our #1 problem for finishing cattle in the state of Kentucky, so we've got to have that infrastructure. We've got dairies that are out of business now who have a great infrastructure that we can capitalize on, and we have monoslope barns and other barns like that we can capitalize on to be able to finish those cattle. I'd like to see some involvement from the Agriculture Department in helping tackle this issue, but I'd like to know what your ideas are to be able to do that.
Jonathan, you're up first.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Haney. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. You answered your own question and all that. I mean, you really did a good job explaining exactly what we need to do in the industry to try and help that out. To be more specific about the ideas that I have, though, is we need a large-scale processor in the state of Kentucky for our beef cattle industry. We need to help more regionalization with our processors that we have currently to ensure that farmers have access to be able to do that. One of the things that I think that we can look at in modernizing our Ag Development Fund is working towards getting cattle under roof. I think that the two major things that we can do in the state of Kentucky to increase on-farm receipts is one, grain storage facilities on-farm, increasing grain storage facilities for our row croppers, and the second one is getting cattle under roof to be able to finish them out. And I think that that's something that we've got to take over time of educating our farmers to do that. You know, used to we didn't know how to do backgrounders because we were just doing cow-calf pairs. And now we may not necessarily know how to get that 1,200-pound cow finished to where that it's prime beef, Dave. I mean, we need to make sure that if we're doing it right. And so educating our farmers through the cooperative extension program, through our cattlemen's associations, and really we need a central location where the farmers can understand and know that they can go to get those resources. And I know that you and the livestock commodity groups have been working towards that end. It's something that I support. And what I would really like to see happen for our farmers in this state is to where that we know without a shadow of a doubt that we're going to be able to make a product on these things, because we have to worry about the weather, we have to worry about market fluctuation. The more risk that we can get out of it, the more that we can understand that we're going to have this calf, it's going to get fed, it's going to get fat, and we're going to be able to sell it for a certain price, the better off that we're going to be, so that we can plan for the future, so that we can buy equipment, so that we can buy land, so that we can invest in the infrastructure that we need. That's extremely important. That's what me and my dad are talking about now on our farm, is how do we get to a point to where that instead of us running 800 to 1,000 head of backgrounders, that we can cut down on that, get more finished cattle on our farm to where that we can get a higher profitability whenever we sell.
Thank you, Andy, for your question. And this is something that I talk about a lot. We have to start with the demand side of the agriculture equation before we start talking about the supply chain. And this is what we saw in hemp in Kentucky, is that we told farmers to raise something, we told them that there was a market for this, but we didn't have processors in place and we didn't have retailers in place for it. I mean, it really does start with getting those processors in Kentucky and winning that conversation from a site selection and economic development conversation. We lost that plant to Missouri because Missouri had a sales tax exemption on construction materials and labor. And when you're building a $700 million plant, that means a lot in the process that you have that upfront savings. So we're going to have to think about how we change our economic development incentives in Kentucky so we can win those large processing operations. It also continues into having small processors in Kentucky. Your next Commissioner of Agriculture is going to have to spend a lot of time making sure that we have smaller processing facilities for farmers that want to start exploring that supply chain to get that directly to the consumer, get that into different types of supply chains. As your next Commissioner of Agriculture, that's the type of policy I'm looking at supporting and really diving into, is how do we start that end game so that our Kentucky farmers can have that opportunity to build those products into that end game of Kentucky products going to processor and going straight to the consumer from our manufacturing and processing plants. And it starts, again, there, and we have to, and to the start point of your question, too, there's a lot that we have to do to start engaging our youth and start exposing them to different opportunities for different styles of production. I'm looking forward as Commissioner of Agriculture to help supporting education in that space so that our kids that are in FFA now and 4-H are getting exposed to different types of production methods so that when they're ready to go back to their family farming operations, they're bringing that experience with them as well.
Okay, next question. Zach?
Joe Paul Mattingly, State Board member. My question is concerning the Kentucky Proud label. We've gotten a lot of mileage out of it over the last several years. The question is, I guess, should the products that carry that label, should they be only processed in Kentucky, or should they be raised and produced and processed in Kentucky?
Joe Paul. This is something that we are going to have to spend some time really evaluating in Kentucky. I mean, really thinking about how we crack open this legislation that created Kentucky Proud. I spoke to the Beekeepers Association in Kentucky and spent a lot of time talking to them about the influx of out-of-state honey that has come into Kentucky and is being bottled and labeled as Kentucky Proud honey. And that's really not the situation we created the program to allow. We want to make sure that Kentucky Proud label is really supporting Kentucky Proud products, and we're thinking about how we are tracking that through the whole supply chain system until we get to that value-added product at the end. It's also true for Kentucky bourbon. We're not in a place where we can track grain across the state of Kentucky so that we know that it ends up in a bottle of Kentucky bourbon to be able to authentically label that as a Kentucky Proud product. We're at a space right now where we should be able to figure that out and to use technology and really make sure that we're advocating for Kentucky farmers with the end product in place. I'm looking forward to, again, cracking up in that legislation and thinking about how we solve that issue. I mean, really modify this Kentucky Proud program so that we're we're advocating for Kentucky farmers in the right way with our finished products in Kentucky.
I'm going to be selfish with Kentucky farmers, so I think that it should be. You know, the thing that we run into is we're getting China things that are coming over here that they're getting relabeled, rebottled, all that kind of stuff, and they're slapping a label on it. I think that we need to do an evaluation and an audit of the program to make sure that those things are not happening if any way possible. I think it's also something to go beyond your question of promoting Kentucky Proud to the next level, of making sure that we're utilizing the brand that we have as Kentucky across the world to get more Kentucky Proud products internationally set out to where our farmers are making profits not just here in local retail centers or at a Kroger, but maybe over in China or over in India and places where the world is expanding and there's becoming more and more middle-class people across the world that have more exposable income to where that they can buy things. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Kentucky Derby, and Kentucky Bourbon have made Kentucky's brand one of the most recognizable things in the entire world, and we need to utilize that. I think we can do that not only through Kentucky Proud products, but also through Kentucky genetics on the farm, with our cattle, with our chickens, with our poultry, and the other things that we grow to where that we can show that Kentucky is the best and our products are the best.
All righty, Zach, yeah, you're next there.
Yeah, Zach Eisen, Mercer County. I represent the 5th District on the state board. Recently here in Mercer County, in my home county, we have unfortunately lost about a 1,300-acre farm in a fight with solar or development. There was several community meetings. It was going on. We have the E.W. Brown generation plant there in Mercer County that produces electricity. So they were coming in to take the 1,300-acre farm and make it into a solar facility. Since that time, through some community discussions, our Mercer County Fiscal Court has decided to purchase 858 acres of this farm to promote industrial development. In all these community hearings that were going on, there were two sides. It was either solar or it was industrial development. There was no voice for the farmer. We lost this prime farmland right in the center of our county, some of the highest productive farmland that we have. As Commissioner of Agriculture, if elected, what do you look at to help preserve farmland, and especially our prime farmland in the state? And then what do you look at to promote reliable energy? I know solar energy is coming on, and it talks about green energy, but it's not reliable, and it can't run our grain bins, can't run greenhouses. There's talks of cutting power off, when it can't be utilized. So as Commissioner of Agriculture, if elected, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't remember.
Is it Jonathan?
Yeah.
Sorry about this.
Zach, thank you. I also wish that you'd have got Scott in a jacket today. I know that you told him you was wearing a jacket. He's supposed to wear one. He left his in the truck, so I don't know. I'm just teasing. I know that because I saw his wife last night at the baseball game. But what I'd like to say about that is I'm not going to be your green energy candidate that's for green energy for the sake of green energy. I don't mind a diversified portfolio when it makes sense, but what we've gotten to a point in America today is where that the federal government, through agendas that we don't agree with, have started subsidizing these things to where that they are out there now. And, it's one thing to be able to put a solar panel on your house or your farm, to be able to utilize that in the way that we all want to be able to do that, to save on our energy costs and do those things. It's another thing to take up 1,300 acres of prime farmland that's going to impact a community from your farm supply stores to your feeds to your cattle market to everything else. It goes well beyond just that individual and the people that are there. The struggle that we have in this is that you go back to the private property rights, is that those farmers have the ability and deserve to make that decision of where and when and how to sell their farm. And so it goes back to the answer that I made with that, is I want to make it so hard for a farmer to make the decision to do that because they're still profitable, they're still getting the labor force that they need, and that it makes it a tough decision for them to decide to subdivide off, put it in an industrial park, or to sell it off to solar. I think that's what we deserve as farmers in agriculture, is for our industry to be profitable to the maximum extent to where that we have to make those tough decisions. And that's what I'm going to be working towards as your commissioner, is making sure that we have the markets available, to make sure that we have all the resources at our fingertips to ensure that those tough decisions are tough decisions, that it's not easy, that it's not a solar farm coming in and saying they're going to give you $10,000 an acre, and why wouldn't you sell at that point? I mean, you can't farm it for that. And so you've got to make those tough decisions. And so I want to make it even tougher, that because you're raising corn, beans, and cattle on it, you're still profitable, you've got an heir coming in, or you've got people that are able to farm it that you're waiting on them to come. I want to make it really hard for people to make that decision.
Well, it's great to know that you were attending a baseball game instead of our KET debate last night. So I would say that there are a few things that we need to really focus on to support diversity within our energy supply for the state of Kentucky. I talk about this frequently, that it is not that we need to look at preserving agriculture land and that we should use marginal land for those type of facilities, and particularly as they relate to solar. One of the best things that you can do as a Kentucky farmer right now is that you can take advantage of the USDA REAP grants, which are grants to support renewable energy, but they're designed to support solar installations on existing facilities. That's the first step as Kentucky farmers that we can take to protecting agriculture land and not moving it out of agriculture production for solar energy. Because at this point, we know that our electric companies in Kentucky want to offer solar as an option. And we have to be proactive about giving them that offering to make sure that we're meeting their demands before we are sacrificing good agriculture land for these solar installations. The next thing that is important about agriculture land and protecting it is that we have to make sure we have good zoning laws in place, and that we're saying, again, as a community, that these zoning laws are important, and that we are going to identify things that should be agriculture land and keep them in agriculture land while protecting and driving industrial growth into the areas that we need to drive it for. That only comes through good community conversations and advocating for that. One of the policies I would like to take a look at as Commissioner of Agriculture is some of our economic development incentives, because we do utilize economic development incentives where they maintain an agriculture valuation, even though it might become a solar operation down the line. We can't have these solar operations keeping that property valuation, and that's the first step in making sure that we're protecting agriculture land, is that if something has an agriculture property valuation, we're keeping it as agriculture property valuation and not offering that benefit to our solar operations.
Okay, another question. I'm going to choose one from the commodity groups right now. Hold just a second, Larry, and I'll take yours just a minute. I'm kind of trying to alternate around. We got a commodity group that wants to ask a question at this point. You already have one. I'm sorry. Larry, we'll take yours.
Larry Thomas. I'm from Elizabethtown. I'm a grain and livestock grower, farmer there right on the edge of E-Town. I'm also a member of our local farmers market and a grower for that market. And since COVID-19, the number of customers has really grown in our local market, and I'm sure all markets across the state from what I'm hearing. Also, the number of growers wanting to get into the local farmers market scene is really growing also. So I would be curious what your thoughts are and things that you can do to support the local farmers markets, organized farmers markets, because I know we have a lot of support for on-farm markets, and but I'm curious what your ideas are for the local farmers market and supporting the growers for that market.
I think one of the great benefits of the Ag Development Funds have been their support of some of these farmers market facilities. One of the programs I worked with when I worked for the USDA and for Cooperative Extension was a program called Plate It Up that was really designed to help support farmers markets and the sale of Kentucky produce at those farmers markets. So we did lots of studies. I got to see lots of farmers markets across the state, and the facilities really matter, and whether or not we're able to have strong farmers markets in these communities. So having a farmers market pavilion that has restrooms, has sinks, has places that you can wash your hands and meet the health code standards are very important, because what that means is that we now have the opportunity to have value-added products as part of that conversation with farmers markets. So that's the first place that I'd really start. These are great community assets because they can also be used for other community activation things like local concerts, movie nights, different things to bring the community together. So they're just a great investment all around. And then secondly, when we're looking at supporting farmers markets across Kentucky, we have to make sure that we have more of these community kitchens, that we're having some processing opportunities for farmers. It's great that we can bring fresh produce to the markets, but a lot of farmers want to bring a value-added product with that. And the third thing I'd like to really support is the double dollars that help SNAP participants that participate in our farmers markets and allow us to continue to support through that. That's certainly a great program. It allows people that may not have exposure to farmers markets to continue to have that exposure while getting food into the hands of hungry people, which is what we want to do as farmers. And looking forward to supporting various farmers market programs, but those are the three main ways. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
That's a good question. It's something I'm pretty passionate about, actually. And I got that way because of visiting farmers markets out in eastern Kentucky. ARH, the Appalachian Regional Health System that's out there, participates in the Double Bucks program that's there, and they also write prescriptions for fresh food for a lot of their people that are there. I think that one of the ways that we can increase profitability for our farmers that are at farmers markets is through our most vulnerable populations that are on Medicaid, welfare, food stamp products that are there. You know, what I look at it as a conservative and as a Republican, looking at those entitlement programs that people are getting, is that if we get fresher food in front of them on the front end, we're going to save money on the back end for Medicaid population through heart disease, diabetes, and other health-related issues. And so I think that as Republicans and as conservatives across the state that we should encourage getting those foods in there instead of Oreos and Ding Dongs and Pepsi, of getting fresh food into people's bodies so that they're healthier. And I think that that's one way that we can help increase profitability for you as a farmer's market person. The other one is value-added products, of being able to get you to a more value-added thing. On-farm retail and farmers markets, the closer we get people from the farm gate to the food plate, it does a couple of things that I've already mentioned. It makes you more profitable as a farmer. It makes them more educated so that all these national organizations that want to make you think that we're beating our animals, poisoning the ground, and eroding the soil, they understand that they see my face, my dad's face, yours and your kids' faces and grandkids' faces, and they know that you're not doing that. In agriculture, the most important year is always next year. It's not this year. We've got to be able to sustain for the future. And in being able to do that and getting people on the farm to where we're pushing back against that narrative, I think is extremely important. And one of the best and easiest ways to do that is at the farmer's market. I think it's also an educational opportunity that we can do with our school systems, of getting more school systems there, of having programs available that we encourage parents to come with their kids. Maybe we give them something free. Maybe we do some kind of educational opportunity. If those kids are there, it's like church. You get the kids, you get the parents. And so if you get those kids to the farmer's market, you're going to get those parents buying products as well.
Stuart?
I'm coming, sorry. Thank you. Stuart Hughes from Scott County. As Commissioner of Agriculture, you all have talked extensively about ag development money. But one of the things, most important things you have to deal with ag development money is the board that you will answer to. I'm interested in your philosophy of ag development, the members that you will appoint to that board, and how they will move that money forward.
What I want to see in an ag development board member is somebody who is wholly focused on what's best for agriculture. Not what's best for themselves, not what's best for anything else other than what's best for agriculture and Kentucky farmers, and looking at it as how the impact of those dollars can impact the most amount of people possible. And I think we've had a great board since I've known about it. A lot of those members that are on there have been there for a while. Some of them are new members. It's always good to have fresh new blood that comes in to where the new ideas can be looked at and talked about. I'm really excited about being able to work with that group of people, and many of them, like I said, are on my campaign committee or supporting my campaign as well. Many people who have been on those boards in the past, and we've got what I love about a campaign like what we've ran is I've been able to identify so many great people across the state of Kentucky that I'm thinking, you know, they'd be great here, they'd be great there. I mean, we've got some real amazing people in agriculture that are entrepreneurs, innovators, and I think that's what those monies are set out to do, is to diversify agriculture in the state of Kentucky, to impact the most amount of people in the most inventive ways that we possibly can, to ensure that agriculture is not just a thing of the past, it's not just a thing of today, but it's what we have for the future. Because I've got 4 kids, and I want my kids to be able to farm as long as I can, and as long as my dad did, and as long as my granddad did. And if we don't have markets available, if we don't have things that we're working on, instead of having a 5-year view or a this year view, we need to have a 30-year view, a 40-year view, a 50-year view of agriculture and what we need. Because I want my kids to be able to do it. I want their kids to be able to do it. There's no better way of being able to impact this world than to take care of what you can take care of, and that's your family. And making sure that your local community is taken care of. And I think that that's really the thing that you need the most in an ag development board member, is looking at how can we possibly make sure that agriculture is sustainable, not this year, not in 5 years, but in 50 years.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question, not just for the Ag Development Board, for all the boards that the Commissioner of Agriculture controls. and gives appointments for. One of the things I'm going to look at is making sure that we have diversity on our boards and that we are bringing in different diverse members of those boards. And that's really important to me as an individual because I know how hard it is to get on these boards and to be involved and bring your version of Kentucky agriculture in place. With that being said, I also think it's very important that we have a quota of women and minorities and that we're getting these diverse perspectives within our advisory boards for the agriculture industry. It is also important that we have a diversity of experiences there because ideally the situation would be that we have someone on a Kentucky Agriculture Board that's bringing additional resources to support our agriculture operations. So when we think about bringing in a banker to participate in the ag development funds and to help support that, making sure that we're getting that perspective so that we can work collaboratively with those local bankers across the state to make sure that we're deploying those funds, particularly as they relate to the Beginning Farmer and Rancher program and what we're supporting with our Beginning Farmer support programs. Agriculture isn't just all of us in the room today. It is certainly a much broader scope for the state of Kentucky, and we have to make sure that we're bringing in friends to the conversation so that we can keep growing the Kentucky's agriculture industry. And that's really what I'm looking forward to because my ultimate objective with the ag development funds would be that we are supporting projects that have economic multipliers and that are bringing additional benefits to our rural communities. The more that we can bring in a project that's going to create 3 jobs down the line, the better off our Kentucky communities and our rural communities are going to be. And those are the types of projects we need to support with our ag development funds, and particularly as we're thinking about strengthening our rural communities for our Kentucky farmers. You can't be successful alone, and most Kentucky farmers know that. You have to have your full ecosystem there to support you, and I'm looking forward to making sure that we're reflecting that in our appointments to our ag boards.
Okay, Mr. Good.
Hello, I'm Greg Good, a dairy farmer from Casey County, here representing KDDC. As many of you know, Kentucky's down to about 300 dairy farms throughout the state right now. And it seemed like the big thing that's really detrimental to the dairy industry is the hauling issues. On our farm, we've had 3 different hauling companies in the last 2 years. Going back, they can't get drivers to drive the truck, so they can't do it. But a lot of the processing plants in Kentucky, they bring milk in from other states. For the last 2 years, our milk has been going down to Athens, Tennessee, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. All the dairies are in our area, or most of the dairies are in our area. A lot of them down the Glasgow, Bowling Green area. All that milk is moving south. What can we do to keep that milk, to incentivize the processors that are here in the state to use Kentucky milk? What do y'all think we could do about that?
I was told Joe Paul Mattingly was going to ask the dairy question, so you're switching things up on us today. So this is something that, again, your ag commissioner, particularly an ag commissioner that has a lot of business experience and has a lot of economic development experience, should be there having those conversations and setting up the conversations with those executives. If it's something that we need to offer some sort of tax exemption or we need to negotiate with them to help it make a business sense for them so that we're supporting Kentucky products, we need to have those conversations. And you need someone who can be real aggressive in representing your interests as farmers in those conversations. And that's truly where this office is about economic development. It is not about, just like ignoring the supply chain. It is truly about, hey, how can we get these products from the farm gate into these corporate supply chains and do it in a way that gets our farmers the premium price for it? And that's what I'm looking forward to doing as your next Commissioner of Agriculture, and I'm looking forward to bringing that business experience into those conversations and really advocating and driving that home.
Greg, me, you, and whoever you want to take, let's go talk to those companies and find out what we can do. For me, I'm not a dairyman, never been involved in it. And so I'd love to have your input, KDDC, and let's just go and talk to them and meet with them. I think it's one of the things that, as your Commissioner of Agriculture, that I can do probably the most effectively is get groups together and go talk to these companies who are your end product user, the ones that you're selling to, and saying, hey, how can we increase your production? What can we do? Is it a policy that's in your way? Is it something in the industry? Is it a workforce issue? What can we do to help advocate for what you need? It's things like at the JBS plant, making sure that here in Louisville, that we've got that for our hog farmers in the state of Kentucky. We've got to go to these companies to ensure that if they're thinking about expanding, that they want to expand in Kentucky. And so I'd love to go with you and whoever else you want to take with us whenever we get there to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to improve your situation and that company situation in Kentucky.
Okay, thank you. We've been here about an hour and a half, and we got some more comments coming. And then we're going to have opportunity to ask questions individually. We'll have plenty of time. I don't think they're going to run out the door anytime quick. But one thing for sure, we're pretty fortunate to have two very good candidates for Commissioner of Agriculture. Now we're going to give them the opportunity to do closing remarks. They've got 5 minutes, and by way of the coin toss, I said that right this time, coin toss, Sierra will go first in her closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions and to test my knowledge on Kentucky agriculture, and ideally I'd look at continuing that as your next Commissioner of Agriculture, because these type of collaborative conversations are how we get good policy in place and how we can really make a difference for this industry in Kentucky. In conclusion, I want to ask specifically for your vote. One of the things that we've done on this campaign is not take anything for granted and make sure that we're specifically asking for each and every person's vote. And it's important to do it not just for the agriculture audience, but for audiences all across Kentucky. And I've worked really hard to make sure that we're getting this agriculture message and how important the Commissioner of Agriculture office is to non-agriculture audiences as well. So thank you for being here today. I would love to have your support. A vote for me is really a vote for how we bring a business expertise into this office and help how we continue to drive value for Kentucky farmers. I'm looking forward to being your next Commissioner of Agriculture, and certainly we'll be around to answer any additional questions that you have if you want to stump me some more after the hard questions you've asked today. Thank you again.
Mr. Haney, Eddie, Sharon, thank you all so much for your leadership in agriculture. Drew and John, thank you so much for your all's leadership and what you do for the Farm Bureau Federation and the insurance side. I appreciate it from as a farmer and as a member of Kentucky Farm Bureau. Thank you to the board and all of your all's members who work diligently on a daily basis to ensure that you're advocating for what we need in Kentucky, especially in rural Kentucky and agriculture. You have my thanks. You have my gratitude. I tell people all the time that gratitude's free, and so you might as well give it freely. And I just really appreciate what you all do every single day. I thank you for the opportunity to be here with you to express my views and vision for the future of Kentucky agriculture. And I say the future of Kentucky agriculture because I believe my family represents that. My granddad has recently passed away. He was the best man I ever knew. It's what I learned everything from. Many of you all in here, your dads or your granddads, you all probably say the same thing. He just had a way of being able to predict the market. He knew what was going on. My dad's the hardest working man that I've ever met in my entire life. And myself, I'm coming in of age now on my farm to where that we're starting to do some new innovative things on our farm, doing more agriculture tourism, doing some more direct-to-consumer things. You can see that transition that's happening through agriculture just in my family. And I hope that my kids see the value in representing agriculture the way that I do, in being on the farm and raising their kids there. There's no better way of raising kids than on a farm. It teaches that work ethic. It teaches what a handshake means. It teaches you the values that we have as Kentuckians. And so I'm extremely excited to be your Commissioner of Agriculture. I can't wait to where that whenever I get to wake up on a daily basis, that I'm fighting for your interest every single day. When I wake up in the morning and my feet hit the ground, there's three things that I fight for. I fight for my family, I fight for my farm, and I fight for conservative values. And I want to be your fighter as Commissioner of Agriculture. It's what I've done in my tenure as being in the legislature, of fighting for values that I think that Kentuckians need, fighting for the things that we needed economically, that we needed culturally. It's what I did as a board member in Garrett County, at Garrett County Farm Bureau, was to fight for the things that agriculture needed in our local community, of being present there with you on the front lines, not behind, not in front, but beside of you all fighting on a daily basis to ensure that agriculture had what it needed. And that's what I want to be as your Commissioner of Agriculture. I'm really excited about the opportunities that we have moving forward in agriculture. A lot of times you hear a very pessimistic outlook on what looks like in politics and in government today and in America. But I have nothing but a positive attitude about what the future holds for not only agriculture in this state, but for Kentucky and America as a whole. Because I go talk to the next generation. I've been with these FFA students. I've been with these 4-H students. I go out and I talk to these business leaders that are across the state that are innovating, that are putting their blood, sweat, and tears in the business that they actually are operating. And I can tell you that it is extremely fascinating. It's extremely motivating whenever you're talking to these people about what the future looks like in the state of Kentucky. And so I would ask you this. I would ask for your vote, I'd ask for your support, and I'd ask for your prayers. And I'll tell you that the last 30 days of this campaign, we're going to be running hard going to the finish line. And I can't wait to get to that finish line, to get in the position, to start putting together a team working with me on a daily basis to work with you. And this is what I want to make you. One promise is that I want to be a partner in progress with you here at Farm Bureau, the commodity groups, and people all across the state of Kentucky to ensure that you know that you've got somebody that understands the struggle that you're going through on the farm, that you've got somebody that understands the struggle that you're going through, making sure your kids are getting the education that they need, making sure that you're getting the health care that you deserve to be able to have, to make sure that you're getting those struggles taken care of, that you've got somebody that understands that and is going to fight for you on a daily basis. And so I'd leave you with this. I've got the experience, I've got the understanding, the know-how, and the drive, and there's not going to be somebody who's going to work harder for you on a daily basis than I am. And I'm Jonathan Shell, running for Commissioner of Agriculture as your Republican nominee, and I'd appreciate your support and vote. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you very much. As I said a while ago, we're in good hands with candidates for Commissioner of Agriculture. I want to present each of you a playbook. Certainly, you'll see more of that.
Mr. Haney, you know what I say about Frankfurt? Is that there's three things that we have to govern by in Frankfurt: the Bible, the Constitution, and the Kentucky Farm Bureau Policy Manual.
Yeah, very good. Again, I appreciate that very much. For those members of the media, we're going to give it your turn now to come down front, and candidates will be available, and you can ask questions ever how you would like to do that. For the rest of us, you are invited to lunch, and lunch will begin right through here. Salads are preset in that room in there, and there will be a buffet line, so you can enjoy at your leisure whenever you're ready to go. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating, coming today, talking about the issues that are so ever important to Kentucky and to rural America. All these are connected. So thank you very much. And again, let's give our candidates another round of applause, and we'll be adjourned.